In the Design Lounge brings together experts from retail, finance, manufacturing, business, and design to cover the world of business as it stands today. We're going to discuss in this board how to pivot, how to take advantage in this topsy-turvy environment, all over your favorite cocktail. I'm your host, Brandon Gasson. Welcome to In the Design Lounge.
Thank you for joining us for episode 3 of In the Design Lounge, a toast to growth and innovation. We might as well get started now. Sponsored by Design Within Reach and Challenge Hardware. My name is Brandon Gasson. I'm your host, and we have an excellent discussion to dive into. But first, I would like to introduce all our guests, an excellent panel, virtual panel, I guess, if you will. To begin, we have Ivy Ross. Ivy is the Vice President of Design for the hardware product area at Google. She and her team have launched a collection of consumer hardware products ranging from smartphones to smart speakers. Ivy previously held executive positions at Calvin Klein, Swatch, Coach, Mattel, Art.com, Bausch & Lomb, and Gap. She's a contributing author for books such as The Change Champions Field Guide and Best Practices in Leadership Development and Organizational Change. And she's been representing several other titles. She was the keynote at the Nokia World Design Conference and Fortune Magazine's Most Powerful Women Summit, and was cited by Fast Company and Business Week as one of the new faces of leadership. Further, she's a renowned jewelry artist with works in the permanent collections of 12 international museums. She's a winner of the National Endowment for the Arts Grant and has received the Women in Design Award and Diamond International Award. Welcome, Ivy.
Glad to be here.
Yes, excited to have you. Okay, next, we have Ben Groom. Ben is the Global Chief Digital Officer for Herman Miller Group. He spearheads digital across all of its 9 brands, including Design Within Reach and Hey. Ben oversees all facets of digital from e-commerce, engineering, design, marketing, and wholesale partnerships to data and analytics. Before landing at Herman Miller, Ben was a principal at Boston Consulting Group, where he advised many of the world's leading organizations on strategy and transformation, with a focus on the intersection between consumer products and technology. Ben co-led the design and development of BCG's New York office, which was described as the office of the future by Fortune Magazine. Ben, thank you for joining us.
Great to be here.
Absolutely. And then Jaime Schmidt from my hometown, Portland, Oregon. Jaime is an entrepreneur and founder of Schmidt Naturals, a global brand of natural personal care products that she launched in 2010. The line is sold in 30 countries at retail locations including Target, Costco, Whole Foods, Walmart, and CVS. In 2017, Schmidt Naturals partnered with CPG giant Unilever, with Jaime continuing as the brand's founder and spokesperson. Today, Jaime is focusing her efforts on helping emerging entrepreneurs pursue their own dreams. She co-founded Color, an investment portfolio that supports women and people of color. And this spring, she launched the Entrepreneurial Dream Project, a grant fund and mentorship program supporting early-stage entrepreneurs impacted by the recent economic recession. Recipients will receive capital and coaching from a dream team of 50 business leaders, from Mark Cuban to Rebecca Minkoff. And also, I noticed Stephen Green, who I know, is also on the team. So I had to throw that in. That's my guy. And then you just launched your first book just this September, Supermaker: Crafting Biz on Your Own Terms. How are you doing?
I'm good. Yeah, a week off my book launch. So my spirits are high and I'm still feeling the energy from that.
Yeah, no, it like literally just launched, right?
Yeah, last Tuesday.
Well, congratulations.
Well, by the time this is shown, it'll be a month, but yes.
It'll be everywhere. Okay. Yeah. So last but certainly not least, Tyson Villeneuve, event producer and founding partner of the Social Concierge, a boutique branding, marketing, and event design agency specializing in unique premium solutions for a range of experiential-focused clients around the world, such as Nike, Porsche, and Lululemon. Among their typical pace of 40 to 50 events annually, his company also produces their own signature events, including the Dig and Cup, Le Dinner and Blanc, and Dinner by Design, often with a fundraising component, but always with the mission of bringing a variety of business sectors together, from the arts, design, music, food, and beverage industries. Tyson, thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
We are super excited, right? And obviously right now is such an interesting time We're all going through it, if you will, and kind of adapting and pivoting. On today's episode, a toast to growth and innovation. We want to explore if it's possible to grow and scale in a constantly changing climate, and there's no climate that's changing more rapidly than ours right now. This is the time for business to assess and adapt to this quickly evolving market, but how do we use innovative concepts to move a business forward and gain market share? So for our first question, I would love to hear what innovative adaptations have you made within your business or that you've noticed just in the marketplace since the pandemic altered all of our lives?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in from a product standpoint. I do have to say first, on a personal level, I delayed my book launch because of COVID, right? I was scheduled to release late April, which was right at the height of the COVID kind of madness and people figuring out what that meant for their lives. So I decided to postpone it until September. We're still in the same conditions we were then, but I think people have, I guess, at least settled into what life is like now, with COVID. And so, on a personal level, that was not an easy choice, but it didn't feel right selling something in the midst of like this, crazy pandemic. And so I think everybody can relate, no matter what the industry, of like how difficult and truly challenging it is to speak to an audience and try to sell. And back to consumer, there's a lot of adjustments that I've been seeing with my portfolio companies that I invest in and just friends in the industry, really adjusting their product roadmaps. The products that we thought customers were going to be wanting in 2020 has changed. We're looking for things now that are more practical, and that means, making adjustments to maybe some of the long-term plans that we had for the business. Also, there's some more, obvious adjustments like that restaurants are going through, for example. Maybe that means they're packaging up, some of their meals into take-home kits that people can make at home themselves, or bottling up some of their own products, like their hot sauces. So it's been really fascinating to watch, and it's certainly, I think the times that have changed for long term.
No, I think that's the thing is how do we create this new normal, right? I know one of the other sponsors of the show, Chown Hardware, they were literally opening their Seattle location in April as well. And of course that got pushed back. And I think what we're all seeing is we came into this not knowing what was going to happen, right? Because this is unprecedented times. We didn't know how long it's going to last. What's it going to be like? Is this just going to be a temporary, thing, or is it going to be long term? And like you said, Jamie, it is going to be long term. Ivy, what are some things that you guys have seen, or like I said, from within other companies that have been beneficial during this time?
Well, one of the first things I did was when this happened was shut down, and I have hundreds of designers that we're now working, we work in 3D, we're now working virtually, flat. But I really thought it was important that and we're the creatives of the company, that we think about what is the future that we want to see coming out of this. Because if we don't start thinking about that, people will just go back to normal, quote unquote. And I believe Mother Nature sent us to our rooms and said, you go to your room and think about what you've been doing in the last 50 years and don't come out until you have a more balanced life. And I think I always thought Mother Nature was the best designer. Now I think she's the best strategist. But I did ask my team, and we just published for ourselves, to do fairy tales from the future, to write. This is a book we did for ourselves, where I asked all the creatives to think about, a fairy tale starts with once upon a time. It should start with once upon a time there was a invisible virus in 2020. It always has a happy ending, and it always has a moral in between. And so, but within that, a lesson learned. You can use fantasy characters, etc. So I had the team really pair up with each other virtually, animators, writers, and create a story from the future, looking back as to what this pandemic was going to teach us, and hope that, and then I gave this book to all the senior executives and hope that it would influence the way we think about the kinds of products we want to make in the future and what alterations we might want to do, because I feel like unless we start to plant some of those seeds now, it's too easy to go back to the way we were without really thinking about what I believe Mother Nature sent us to our rooms to think about.
I mean, absolutely. I think to your point is now is a time where we really can like design the future, right? Like we've kind of all been put to ground zero. And it's like, okay, not just like only adapt, but how do we like innovate? How do we actually design the future that we want to be a part of that's going to be better than what we came from? Ben, how have you guys innovated and adapted? And actually, and also I want to add into that, like in a time where we're now in unprecedented times, where we're adapting and making changes, how do you remain innovative and not just kind of pivot to pivot and not just kind of go from where we were before, but how you actually do, how do you remain constantly innovative while you're changing dramatically potentially?
Yeah, look, for us, so again, I lead a digital group, within a company that's vertically integrated. We have manufacturing sites, we have brick and mortar retail locations. And, really it's been an extremely busy time for my team, because we've been trying to take as much of that as possible and digitize it so that we can continue to serve our customers during this period. And so for more than anything, it's just been an extraordinary accelerant, right, of our digital roadmap. But when I think about what we're placing more emphasis on, I think the first one is great partnerships. I think, in our strategy pre-COVID, we were planning on building a lot of new digital products ourselves. And we just don't have the luxury of time, just given how quickly the world is changing. So we've really turned to great partnerships, great vendors, and looked for people who have already built these things and formed partnerships very quickly, and tried to ensure those partnerships are very communicative, so you can get on the phone and be like, hang on, our business is changing like this today. What can we do tomorrow? Yeah. And I have to say, it's been a really exciting thing. And I think it's part of the kind of third prong of your question, which is by creating your strategy around almost this kind of symbiotic relationship of different partnerships, you can, I think, become more innovative, because you're all, feeding each other with ideas. And I think you're able to react faster. And, I must say, Ivy, Google has been one of those for us during this time. I would describe our relationship as really becoming much closer during this period. We're actually rolling out a pilot with you guys tomorrow on a pretty exciting piece, but there's been many others. And, at the same time, I think it's been a period where you have to be really listening to your customer, because things are changing so quickly. Their needs are changing quickly. And, I would say, Jamie, to your point, I think their sensitivity, this has also been a period of crisis, right?
Absolutely.
A lot of loss and people's livelihoods changing. And you never want to put out a piece of marketing or a product that isn't sensitive to what's going on. So I think there's been an increased need to be listening, and pivoting how you're doing things on a very quick basis.
I think we've all had to become more thoughtful, being a little sequestered. It's given us time in isolation to be more thoughtful about what's essential.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And I think I would add to that, just like showing an element of humanity, right? Like we as business leaders are going through this too. And I think just being transparent with our customers, like this is hard, that we've never experienced something like this, and just being really open, like is so key to build trust even.
Well, building trust as well is something super important, and maintaining that trust is super important. And I think that those are two big opportunities and key focus areas that companies and brands, no matter what size and where they are, need to pay attention to. It's not just about the innovation on a technical back end. It's not just about the innovation on a creative standpoint. It's also about deepening our layer of understanding of how people are behaving right now and what their needs are, and being able to fulfill those needs, because fulfilling those needs in person is very different from fulfilling them online, which is very different from how people behave. And so it's, the industry's online shopping, online everything has taken years to, reach this beautiful understanding of how people like to engage and shop online and behave online. And there was always a clear delineation between people's behavioral patterns online and what they like to do in person. And now that's all becoming blurred, because people no longer have the option in general to interact in person the way that they did. And so that basically leads, for my industry in the events world, it wasn't that there was a company issue with every company adapting differently. It was an entire industry flatlined in 2 weeks. You know, when the events industry, think about it, live events is a multi-billion-dollar industry around the world, like, you know, in North America alone, with hundreds of billions of dollars, and employs like millions of people, if not like hundreds of thousands, in gig economies and artists and all different types of people. But when you take an entire industry that completely shuts down 95% of all of its revenue, anything that, you know, in BC here, we can't have gatherings more than 50 people. And I know every state is different, and every case is different and approaching it differently. But, you know, when you can't gather in person and have those interactions in person, be it, you know, shopping in a shopping market or at an in-person event, and people's behavioral patterns have to shift online, there's a lot of considerations that brands need to take into helping hold their guests and consumers' hands to do that process. Because it's, in addition to all of the crazy things that are going on for people in their day-to-day lives, just how they need to interact with brands is changing, and it's being forced upon them. So, you know, being able for them to feel comfortable with brands and comfortable with this new process, I think is also going to be a huge component of driving creative success and innovation on how companies and brands adapt.
I'll add to that too, that I think it forces brands to just go deep inside themselves and to really figure out for themselves, like, what do I stand for? You know, a lot of companies are founded on, you know, what this purpose of making money, you know, and building something huge. But in times like these, you know, it really kind of challenges us to figure out what we stand for and being able to articulate it.
And also, I think how you treat your employees during this time. I know at Google, I've had more of my team say, oh my God, with the kind of consideration Google is giving, you know, care leave, take multi-weeks, just whatever you need, and being supportive, the loyalty that we now feel to the company of you've done right by us during this time of crisis, goes a long way for both our customers, but also for our employees. I think it's an opportunity to create that loyalty.
I think that's an excellent point for sure, because people are looking for comfort right now wherever they can find it. And if you can be that brand, if you can be that stability for them that they can kind of lean into a little bit, I think it's going to be massively beneficial to building loyalty, to your point, Ivy.
Yeah, going forward, I think that will be forever lasting, you know, for sure.
Yeah, I think the marketplace is requiring a level of transparency now than ever before. Like, it is requiring businesses to really, like Jamie said, like, what do you guys stand for? More than just being a business in capital, what do you guys stand for? What is your mission? What is your core competencies? And then also going to Tyson, what you said, I feel like it's not just innovation on products and technology, but it's innovation in how you communicate, and just by being, like you said, thoughtful and listening to the marketplace, and it's innovating. How are you guys communicating that, right? How do you communicate as Ivy, as you just said, how you're taking care of your employees internally, but also to the marketplace? How are you guys communicating your innovation? I mean, as just a feeling, just the ethos of the company.
Yeah, for us at the Social Concierge, you know, we in live events, we're a hybrid agency, so we own and build and design a bunch of our annual big events and festivals in Canada and do some projects internationally, but then we also have client projects as well. So when COVID first hit, we basically needed to ensure first and foremost that all of our clients, we had a strategy and a plan with, but then after that, you know, move forward, we needed to instantly adapt and throw ourselves into virtual because it was the only COVID-proof, socially responsible thing to do. But of course, virtual events are still in their infancy, relatively speaking, in terms of general public understanding. So it's actually a really opportunistic and exciting time, but also a very confusing and frustrating time in our industry, because if you can find a path through and adapt, there's a lot of opportunity in there. You know, I was reading another article recently that was saying that, you know, the events industry has had live events are having their Napster moment. Which is, you know, back when everybody was buying CDs and, you know, music was just regularly available. And then of course, Napster happens and everything goes digital. Well, now, you know, fast forward 15, 20 years, that's the norm. But that was massively disruptive at the time. Absolutely. And you look at the global events industry right now, from concerts to festivals to basically like cultural events, family gatherings, weddings, like everything, any form of live event, theater, Broadway, like opera. They're all finding these ways, and they have to creatively navigate how to communicate their art form to their audience. And so they're trying to do it on two facets. One, which is, how do we even do this technically when we're used to walking onto a stage and singing opera, but now we can't do that. So how technically do we do that? But then more importantly is, how's the audience going to be receptive? And are they going to be as engaged in these new formats as possible? And those are the types of things that we need to think about in our industry to really kind of evolve to the next level. Is, beyond the technical capabilities in events, now it's, okay, how do we also engage an audience when we're, as event producers, thinking, we need to compete with broadcasting stations, YouTube, like all these other types of things to get people's engagement from a digital perspective. So I think that there's a lot of evolution that's happening in our industry in general, that's also being reflected across every industry in terms of these types of user engagement platforms, and how people can not only connect with each other internally from a corporate standpoint, because people still need to connect, but also with their guests and with their consumers.
And how much of that do you think, I agree, and I think creativity is about solving problems, and it's been amazing to see different industries and different groups solving problems, working around our restrictions now. How much of that do you think is going to stay after we get through this? I mean, I've heard certain people, like with live events, saying, seeing the advantage of doing some of these things online, and there's no reason to go back because I can reach more people doing things virtually. I mean, I'm just curious people's thinking as to, is some of that going to stay with us, you think, or is it going to go back?
I 100% think so, Ivy, to be honest. I think that, it's kind of like when you go to a restaurant and you try something new for the first time and you're like, hey, I'm not super comfortable with this, but I kind of like these aspects of it. And I think that, that's the birth of fusion restaurants, right? I guess in the ultimately, but I think that, moving forward, not only are virtual events a solution that are needed in the immediate future for large companies and brands and people to be able to connect and gather in a more meaningful, interactive way than a Zoom call. And also not in as technologically advanced way as a VR helmet with a full set that most people don't have. There's got to be a middle ground that's approachable and that's readily adaptable. There aren't a lot of companies that have turnkey solutions at the moment, but there are a lot of companies working on solutions right now because there's a clear and evident need for all the millions of people that need to gather regularly to gather virtually, to do it safely and do it within a form of social responsibility. But that being said, people become creatures of habit. And so at the moment, they're being forced into this technological world of engagement that they might not normally be used to, but it becomes a bit routine. 6 months ago, I know right now, I would have been still trying to figure out how to move my screen to make sure that this Zoom was working properly. But now we're kind of all accustomed to that. So I think people are now going, okay, we get it. What's next? And how do we integrate? But I think there's also going to be a lot of people that enjoy these aspects and want to see those then brought back into real life events moving forward after this. So I think what we're going to see after we start to get back, maybe in end of 2021, early 2022, into live events back as normal, especially with sports, especially with big festivals. I think we're actually going to see integration of these cool tech elements that we've all been kind of forced to use over the last year and a half, but a lot of people are really going to start to enjoy and become accustomed to.
Yeah, it's interesting. We've been forced to it shows we can change our behavior as a society. In this case, it's been forced, but even with technology, there was before we went into this, in some cases, a bit of a backlash, and now it's fallen on us to show how technology can be helpful. Because there is, I think, technology. I'm into technology that amplifies our humanity, doesn't take us out of it, and connects us. And so there's been some great examples, and we've donated home hubs to hospitals so that people can be connected to their loved ones virtually. It's been interesting to see. By changing this behavior, how it's going to change the market for some of these things.
Just thinking about even, social media, and like Twitter is seeing more engagement than it ever has before. And I like, Ivy, what you said about using technology in a way that, you worded it beautifully. I guess
amplifies our humanity.
It amplifies our humanity.
There it is.
Yeah, and I think we're all struggling with that on a really personal level. Like, how do we find that balance? I mean, that's just me personally too. But I think yeah, platforms like Twitter and now Clubhouse, I don't know if any of you are on there, all these opportunities to really stay connected and just, yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see like how much of a need there is for the in-person after all this.
Yeah, for me, the biggest amplification of humanity that's come out of this is those beautiful interruptions of family life on a Zoom call, you know, where a dog climbs in or a child tugs at the sleeve.
Yeah.
And I think that's been a really positive change. You know, I for one have spent a lot of my career trying to hide that stuff. And I feel much more, you know, empowered now to let it happen. I almost deliberately try and let it happen so that my team feel more empowered to not be hiding it. I think it's a fantastic shift. But, you know, to go back to the events example, and I think it's reflective of the role of just the physical environment in innovation and progress, right? I think I, for one, am certainly, you know, loving the fact that I can still attend events when otherwise my calendar wouldn't have been able to make it possible. You know, the idea of flying across the country and carving out a day was just not possible. So I would say no, right? Whereas now with these virtual events, you know, you can carve out just that session and have zero transit time and make it possible. I think that's really positive. But the downside is you miss out on some of the serendipity that happens in and around the event. You know, I think about a great mentor relationship I have right now, which was someone I met during a coffee break in a conference last year. And we just happened to run into each other and really form a very powerful connection. And that we are now great friends and help each other professionally. And that, I just feel like there is much less of that happening right now. It's really hard to generate that kind of connectivity in a virtual environment. And I think even within our teams, it's harder for those connections, those more, you know, serendipitous connections to be happening without some form of the physical environment.
Yeah, I think the spontaneity has been taken out, and I'm finding that it's like the informal meetings have to become more formal because you have to make time and book it, right? And the formal ones have become more informal because they all have the same weight. I totally agree with you about, in some ways, I will never look at the senior team. You know, I'm used to seeing the senior team sitting around a boardroom, so to speak, or a meeting room. And now my image is with a child or an animal in their lap. And I think in some ways, this is breaking down the barriers, right? There was always work and home. And so you're absolutely right. We're getting insight into people's homes. But if in some weird way, it feels like a more personal connection that in this impersonal way that I hope we're going to take back with us. So this barrier between, ironically, work and life has been broken down, like every other barrier is being broken down as well.
Can I ask you a question though, Ivy, which relates to your opening comment about, you know, Mother Nature hopefully using this as an example to give us more balance. I'm fascinated in people's feelings around balance right now. I think what I'm observing is everyone's using this as a time to reflect on what's important to them, which I think is really positive. But when it comes down to balance, i.e. the number of hours a day we're spending working, I'm concerned about the impact that this period is having. So I'd just love to hear your thoughts and others' thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, I think the word balance, I think what we're being asked to do is be thoughtful and be reflective on when this is over, what does balance look like in life? So for example, I think we've been, since the Industrial Revolution, we have been about optimizing for work and we haven't had enough play. I think we've been, you know, we just haven't stopped. It's been optimizing on this kind of treadmill. I think, you know, now that we've stopped traveling and being in our cars as much, the airs have cleared up. But what does that balance look like when we're done with this? You know, because it can't be nothing at all. But so I think about everything, you know, between work and play, between travel and not travel, and going to the office and not going to the office. I think all these categories, we have to look for what that balance is. I know myself spending more time at home with the family and feeling more connected to them versus commuting every day 4 hours. You know, what does balance look like? I've never been healthier because I can take walks and be on the treadmill versus commuting to work. But what does balance look like? Is it in the future? Is it going into the office 3 days a week when we need to collaborate, but in 2 days a week, being able to be home and having a healthier life? So I think it's not, I agree with you. It's hard. Right now, I don't feel like we have balance. We have extreme behaviors, but I think Mother Nature is saying, go to your room and think about what you've been doing for so many years, and think about how we've been optimizing for our frontal lobe and for our work ethic. And what does it look like? What does balance look like when we're done here?
Yeah, can I play it back in a slightly different way,
Absolutely.
which is, I think in the past we've commuted to the office because it was convention to do so, right? Or we've traveled cross country to that meeting because we were expected to do so. Hopefully now it's because it is the right thing and the important thing to do.
Yes.
Today is a very collaboration focused day. Let's make sure we're all there in person.
Exactly.
Or it is critical that we have a get together after that meeting that's on the other side of the country. So let's all fly there.
Yep.
But rather than convention dictating.
Right, being very intentional about those choices. But it's so interesting to me that we had to pull the plug to the extreme, to your point, to then see the fact that maybe I don't have to get on the plane for every meeting.
I think what we're thinking about too here is not just balance, but structure. And I think a lot of us are really struggling with that. I think there's certainly freedom in this new way of work, but for some of us, like, we need that structure, and we're overwhelmed with having an open day and an open schedule. It's like, how do I prioritize? I don't know how to work, and sometimes we'll sit there and we'll just get sort of overwhelmed with opportunity. I think that's what I'm faced with. Right now, I think it's the lack of structure can be problematic in some ways.
Well, I think in addition to structure, it's also focus. I think that's one of the other things, is that structure allows you to focus on certain elements when you need to. And I think that, there's so much coming at everybody right now, all the time, every day, in terms of information, in terms of things changing, in terms of, personal, familial needs. Everybody's searching, Ivy, to your point, for that balance. And I think that this pandemic has forced people, by staying home, by spending time with themselves, with their spouses, with their partners, with their families, with their kids, everybody are just naturally reassessing how they can find their own sense of balance. And of course, the pandemic threw everybody off like wobbly like this, right? And I think right now we're trying to still figure out like this. We haven't gotten the balance all together yet, but we're getting there. And I think it takes a lot of communication and a lot of explanation and understanding. And I think that that's one of the other things is that I've actually really appreciated about this pandemic from a creative and a design standpoint, in terms of not only how we're moving forward with our business, but also listening and understanding as to how everybody else is moving forward in their industry. And that's why conversations like this in the Design Lounge are so cool, because it's not very often that outside of your own industry, you actually get to converse with other people that are going, okay, cool. How are you guys managing this? Because COVID's the one flatlining unifier that is connecting everybody around the world right now. It's affected everybody in every industry in some form or another. And so just even having these dialogues about how other people are searching for that same balance and finding it in certain regards, you can pull kind of nuggets from it and adapt that into your own strategy. And I think that the increase in thoughtful dialogue and very honest and transparent conversations around where people are at with their businesses, with their families, with their needs, is actually kind of opened everybody's eyes to what they have been missing and how we can change the structure and take this opportunity to change the structure for the better. And Ivy, to your point with the environment, I mean, that's like, DEFCON 5 at this point. And, if it's taken a pandemic globally for us to pay attention to that, then at least we're doing it, But I think that it's definitely a right time, as we are completely surrounded by smoky skies right now, to kind of take some of the time that we're looking at to look at the balance within our own interior lives, and also adapt that from both a creative design and overall livelihood standpoint and organizational standpoint, and how we can also tread softer on the earth too.
Oh, I actually think that this is a warning. This is a gift, that to have this time to go inside, to figure out how to prevent humanity from disappearing, meaning that the gift of this time to be thoughtful around understanding, first of all, that it's not too late to change our behavior. Like we see how the air has cleared up without the travel. So it's almost like if we hadn't taken this time out, I mean, again, this is only if we come out of this with a different perspective, but hopefully I'm an optimist. We're going to look back and go, wow, we learned some things both about ourselves, our relationships, our companies, our world, and what we have to do to take care of our world and each other that will last and will change the trajectory of humanity. You know, I think something you said, we are all vulnerable now, which is kind of a unifying factor that, I mean, I've never seen it where everyone feels vulnerable. And I think that's what's enabled this opening up of dialogue, as you said, which I think in the long run will be a good thing.
Yeah, I would love to hear your guys' opinion on the balance and the rebalance, if you will, once we get out of COVID or once this pandemic starts to ease away. But talking about structure, we actually have a game that I need to go to. So we'll definitely go to game one of In the Design Lounge. The first of two is picture phrase. And so again, so what's worked really well in previous episodes, I don't know if you guys saw it, was after every right answer, we toasted. We cheers to the right answer. So that's what we're gonna do. And I'm gonna make sure we all get the right answer. But this is, you know, picture phrase. And each picture combination represents a phrase. The first guest to call it the correct phrase wins. So here's an example of what you guys think it is.
Glass half full.
Yes, JB. Yes. So
you're going to be hard to compete against in this.
Exactly. So we would cheers after every right answer.
Cheers to that.
Cheers. Even an example. But that is how the game goes. So let's go to the next one. Let's see who has the correct
answer. Was
answer.
that practice? Come on.
That was good. That was correct. So here's the next one.
Design.
Design.
Yes. Yes. Cheers. I think that was that you, Ben?
I think so.
Okay.
Ben.
Okay.
I'll take it anyway.
We'll take it. Exactly.
That was fully Ben.
Bookcase.
No.
Bookcase. Story.
Bookcase. Is it not a bookcase?
Novel.
We have a great product called the Story Bookcase, which I'll take that.
Let me see. Oh, it is bookcase.
Yeah.
That was.
Come on.
So I was looking at my cheat sheet and I'm like, I don't have this wrote down. This is not bookcase. So yes, of course, I should have took your word for it.
No, Brandon,
Cheers to that.
The game was way harder than I thought it was for about 30 seconds.
Right. No, definitely.
Out of ideas.
Outdoor lighting.
Wow.
Outdoor lighting. So yeah. This one, you guys got this one.
Love seat.
Yes. Cheers again. Thank you, Jay. The next one.
Sliding door.
Sliding door. Yes, sliding door. Cheers, Tyson. Take a sip.
Rain bar? No.
Yeah.
Wet
There
bar.
you go.
What is a rain
There
bar?
you go. Rain bar.
What is a rain bar? Does anybody know what that is?
Ben, that would be you, right?
Yeah. I'm not sure what that is, but
All right.
it looks fun. I know what a wet bar is.
I know. That's the other thing. Yeah, wet bar would make more sense to me.
Yeah.
We'll go with the rain bar today. Thank you to our sponsor, Design Within Reach and Chown Hardware. All right, so now we're back. So again, we were kind of going into, innovating how we're going to, recalibrate and balance. How do you guys go about assessing which aspects of your department company would benefit from reassessment right now to aid growth and scale? What areas or what part of the business do you like, okay, this is where we really need to focus on to kind of grow at this time?
The first thing I think of is customer support. Like what could be more important And then of course, any department or any activity that leads to revenue. But I think about just like the operational piece too, with product specifically, supply chain. That's a huge issue right now with COVID. So many supply chains have been disrupted. It's hard to get things. And so it's a great opportunity for us as founders and leaders to make sure that we have, backups in place and making sure that our relationships with our suppliers are really strong. I think sometimes when we're leading like a fast growing company, we don't always take the time to kind of nurture those relationships or to make sure we do have things like backup suppliers. And so I think this is a good time for companies to kind of tighten up in those areas too.
And teaching us about resilience, right? When this is over. I mean, I just think what we're learning from this is we have to build our businesses and our processes to be resilient more so than we ever thought.
I think that there's a lot of evolution that's coming in the next few years. And I think that, people just need to be prepared for that. I think that, and the more that they accept it with open arms in terms of like understanding that this is a great time of change and it's just change across the board. And when you can kind of try and go, I know it's difficult for a lot of people and even for myself a lot of the times where I go, okay, this is happening. This is what's going on. How do we, and just understanding that you need to adapt, you need to change, and just being open to that change will make you kind of look at every other aspect of how everything works and see if there's a better potential way to do it. And so I think that there's going to be a lot of positive growth and efficiencies and change and evolution in a lot of businesses and companies across the board right now, because people realize that they need to change. And so they're starting to look at every avenue and facet. I mean, I looked at aspects of my business with my business partner and realized that we were, losing on efficiencies in certain areas that I was just like, holy smokes, we can do better at this. But it wasn't until we were forced to look at every aspect of our business and how to adapt moving forward that, some of those elements came to light. So I think there's going to be a lot of interesting things that, people will be changing towards and adapting and tweaking to make their businesses better regardless.
Yeah, I think Ben, you hit it on it earlier, that the speed at which we have to change now and then we have to pivot is obviously a benefit. But what I want to know also is, as we're now put in that position, as Ivy said, we're being forced into having to change. How do you mitigate risk, right? Because that's one of the things that a lot of small companies that probably are going to be watching this, one of the reasons why they are slower to adapt and slower to pivot and slower to innovate, if you will, is because they're risk adverse, right? And so how do you, in a time where you are moving so fast, the time it takes to make a decision, instead of waiting, like you said, weeks or months, Tyson, you said, we're doing this right now. So how do you actually mitigate risk during this time to innovate? But again, how do you make sure that you don't go too far?
Well, I think it's interesting to ask, what is the riskier thing? There's a great quote, which is often the cost of inaction is greater than the cost of doing something wrong. Right. So, and I think that's very much the case right now. I think companies that are sitting on their hands and being too risk averse are probably the most at threat. Right. I think this is a time to be trying things, as much as possible. If you can get a sense of whether it's going to be well received by your customer before you launch something new, whether that's through customer interviews or micro testing or piloting, that's really helpful in this period. But my bias right now and my team's bias is to try and launch things. If customers are telling us they want it, let's try and launch it. If it's got issues, we continue to evolve it and improve it. Right now doesn't feel like a time to be sitting still.
Yeah, I think collaboration across departments is key, more than ever. Product development, sales, marketing, all need to be talking on the same page.
Yeah,
and we've actually.
Sorry, go ahead, Ivy.
No, I was just gonna say, we've also found things like, for the first time, Apple and Google were collaborating on contact for COVID. So it's brought industries together, competitors, to solve problems and try what does that look like if we work together to solve this problem. But I agree that it is giving us the gift of why not? Why not try this during this time?
Yeah, Brandon, and Ivy, I agree with you. And Brandon, to your point, for small businesses, because I guess I represent small businesses as well in a regard because I don't work for a big company. So to all the points about like paying attention to adaptations and new evolutions in different departments are great. But also as a small business, if you're watching this and you're thinking, well, great, I don't have a department that can evolve into that, or I don't know how to delegate this, or I don't have a team that I can delegate this to that's sizable enough to warrant that, is basically look at your own business and look at your strengths and skill sets and really focus in on what your actually core essential values and are, and then what your core competencies are, and razor in on those and find out how those can be adapted into the new world that we're currently living in. But then in addition to that, by understanding where your strengths are, kind of make sure that you're creating collaborative alliances with potentially other businesses or other people in cross industries that can help propel your business through this challenging marketplace. Because even though, say, theoretically, you can only accent maybe 1/4 as a small business of a service that a company might need, by aligning yourselves with 2 or 3 other businesses that can accent your core competencies under these times, you can kind of come together, because there are a lot of people and a lot of small businesses coming together to collaborate. And it's through these creative collaborations that you can come up with solutions that might not be a one-stop solution with your own company, but perhaps it's a stop solution that can still, help out a potential client or a potential partner by collaborating and making yourself open to collaborations with other small businesses as well. And I'm just saying that from a small business perspective.
No, I think that's great advice.
Yeah, and what I hear a lot of you guys say, and obviously, Ivy, you mentioned this collaboration, maybe even, across, companies that would traditionally be competition, you're now collaborating with. When you're talking about innovation and growth right now, and market share, how are you guys looking at growth? Are you looking at it differently, right? Because again, for some industries, we're now creating new industries, maybe offering different products. So how are you measuring? How are you looking at how to grow, where to grow, even forecasting growth? How has that maybe changed? And then obviously the initial question is, what are you using to grow right now?
Well, I know, we're looking at all of our product line, and some are going above our forecast because of what people need during these times, and some are slightly below. And the question is, everyone, I don't think anyone knows what behaviors are going to continue coming out of COVID. And so I think it's this constant observing the data and then trying to fulfill the needs of what people are asking for. Like I said, certain products are doing better, certain products are doing not as good as expected. So I think it's being very present in the moment and trying to, you can only come up with so many hypotheses, but I think one has to come up with, this is where we think it will land. Also things like, will the shopping online continue as much as it is, or will people be breaking down the doors to, go into physical space? I love the fact that it's caused us to stop and think about, as we said earlier, all of these things. What makes sense? What do we amplify when you're together in a physical space versus what are the conveniences when you're buying online? I mean, I think it's really given us the time and space to kind of think about those things, whereas maybe we wouldn't have stopped to think about it as much. We were just continuing to go on the treadmill that we were on. So I would love to hear if anyone has the answer. I find for our business, it's just a matter of being in the present. I think this is also a lesson in that you can't make too many plans because you don't know. So it's like how to stay in the present moment, digesting what we learn day by day.
And I think not having any assumptions about our target market, just really staying flexible there and assuming that everybody's a potential customer, I think is key right now. There might be audiences out there that you're surprised by. So really making sure your messaging is relevant to everybody. And I think just no assumptions in general, and whether it's product, whether it's marketing, keeping an open mind and flexibility.
Yeah, Jamie, you bring up a great point in terms of, you never know who your new market is. For us in events, that's something that's a huge benefit for virtual events that we never got to experience. Like events, as they're traditionally known, they're very geographically bound. You can only hold as many people as you can in an arena or in a venue. Or, you're going to have a county fair that's only really going to be visited mostly by people in that county. But from a virtual event standpoint, you can have people dropping in. And Ben, earlier to your point, you don't have to fly across the country. You can now just, basically have people sign in. So when you take away these geographical boundaries, the virtual event sphere, as well as just, digital commerce in general, makes the whole world your client. And it's something that if you can actually embrace and try and pivot around and think around, it's actually, to Jamie's point, something super beneficial is that, I had somebody from Honduras join in at one of my events virtually, and I'm in Canada. So, you're sitting there, how did you even get to hear about this? Oh, well, the DJ is friends with my friend who said this would be kind of cool. So I'm just checking it out. And I was just like, I never in a million years thought I would have somebody from Honduras live at one of my events. And, we had an incredible wine partner, a sponsor that came and did a live video shout out from the vineyards in Chile, in the mountains. And they're like, here's our wines. And the viniculturalist came on board and said, thank you so much for participating and enjoying our wines. Here we are, like live from Chile. Those are kind of things I never would have been able to have before at my actual events. So there's this, I would say breakdown of geographical barriers that can come with this virtual economy, at least in my industry. And, when Jamie brings it up is an excellent point, is literally just don't necessarily assume now that who your target audience is, because there could be a whole new market out there for you you're not even really aware of, that's just kind of burgeoning right now.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think, the key theme across what you're all saying is there are actually in many respects less constraints right now to taking a bold bet than there were in the past, right? I think there's less willingness for kind of internal naysaying right now because people know we have to evolve so quickly. As you just said, Tyson, less kind of geographic impediments. You can't give the excuse of needing, we can't get there to see them in person. I think even from an investor standpoint, I think, the investor community, whether you're a listed company or a startup, I think there is a little bit more patience from the investor community right now to be trying new things. So, we certainly feel that right now. We're making some big bets. We're a 115-year-old company, a kind of great American company with, great kind of Midwestern values that's been, renowned for very traditional products over the years. And we're really trying to play in some new places. So we just launched a gaming chair for the first time very recently. Going after a brand new market, a brand new type of customer that we've not really focused on in the past. Even geographically has a very different distribution to our typical products. Much more focused in Asia and different parts of the world. And we couldn't believe the response. We sold out in 4 hours. We were trending on Twitter. We're a company that really focuses on Twitter. But it just was, we really kind of, this community, which we all know is a very passionate, amazing community. They loved being focused on, and the product's really good as well. So it was an amazing experience to go through. And yeah, we're really trying to use this opportunity to do another 2 or 3 bets like that in the near future.
Yeah, I think to your guys' point, and piggyback on what both of you guys said, is not even as much gaining market share within your previous industry, but an expansion of actual market share overall, right? Because the walls have been removed into what you can do, who you can serve, just because of what we're going through. And even new, like you said, to your point, Ben, new product offerings that you thought that wouldn't, work previously. Now it's like, I can actually do this for this new, just totally different demographic in this audience, and they love it. And you can take obviously your core fundamentals of what you guys are great at and apply it to these new markets that you never thought were even applicable. So we're ready for our second game. Let me go to the second one. So So a word will be shown with all of the letters out of order. The first guest to unscramble the letters and call out the correct word wins. All right? So here's a hint. All the words in this round represent product categories offered by our sponsor, Design Within Reach.
That's great.
Furniture.
Yeah.
Wow.
All right? How'd you get the,
Well done.
I think that was a good one. That was good. Oh, cheers. Yes, Tyson. Cheers.
Sorry, I just really wanted that gin and tonic.
Yeah, right. Let us not forget why we're here. You know what I mean? It is for information, but also, make sure you have a time for the drink in the lounge. A little bit tougher for this one. I'll give you a hint. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I was just about to give a hint. Cheers. Of what that was.
Outdoor?
There you go.
Yeah.
What we all want to do right now. I will say it's funny. When I was back in Poland, I've been outside more from April till like June than I had probably been in the previous 5 or 6 years of my entire life. Like I literally became like a true Northwester. I was outside all the time. And that's one of the advantages I think of right now, just slowing down a little bit, right?
Mm-hmm. Bedding. Oh.
Do you have all the answers? Cheers.
I think Jamie does have the answers.
I swear.
I think we tied on that one.
She must have got this before we got started.
Bath.
There you go.
Yeah, I grew up in a Midwest household where we played a lot of cards and we were competitive from an early age.
Oh, that'll do it.
The competition is coming out. The competition is coming out.
Rugs. I'm sorry, guys.
Okay, hold
I'll
on.
step back.
That's the last one you can answer. We have one more. Anyone but Jamie. Oh.
Lighting.
That was my mess. Oh man, enjoy all these categories and more at dwr.com. Thank you, Design Within
Which we've
Reach.
just relaunched, by the way. Great new website. Check it out.
Oh, see, there you go. Right.
I'll check it out.
Yeah, definitely check it out. So to finish up, you guys have given us so much information, so many ideas. Post-pandemic, what are specific differences that are going to be required going forward in this new normal?
I'll start with, I think media and content is going to be so key. It's an opportunity for brands to reach their audience and just to show thought leadership and also gain trust. I think content in general is just, it's becoming so increasingly important, I think, across industries.
Yeah, I think I've heard numerous times from different people from the digital space that really we're all media companies in addition to whatever else we're doing. Yep. And I feel like now one of the ways, because we are separate but together through digital, is really original content as well. Yeah. Like, how do we actually control the relationship or strengthen the relationship even more by offering exclusive content that you can only see with our brand, with our entity or whatever, that really is hitting home with our audiences?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to repeat something that you said earlier, Jamie, and that's around customer service. I think people have migrated to these digital channels, but if you don't get the digital customer service or the omni-channel customer service right, I think a lot of that may migrate back, and I think there's a real opportunity. And there's great technologies right now to be able to have kind of next generation chat where people can, have a voice call or a video call with a highly trained customer service representative and have that kind of great in-store experience, but through a digital channel. And I think the companies that double down on that will do really well in this next period.
Yeah, I would say customization and personalization. I think people are going to come out of this with a better sense of who they are, what they want. And I think the companies that can be more personal, both through trust and connection, but also services and products that are in some way customizable to your own life you choose to live, the way you choose to live it. Our homes are now going to have to be flexible to be our offices, our school rooms. And so I think there'll be a whole sense of products that are much more flexible and customizable.
Yeah, no, I think I agree with all of those things. And, I think that for us from an events, perspective, I mentioned earlier, like our entire industry has changed forever. And I think that, post COVID, there's going to be a lot of new implementations from, at least in the immediate future, from just general safety protocols to a whole bunch of venue protocols, a whole bunch of ways that people think about what creates an entertaining event and how to make sure that people stay engaged. I think it's something that's really important. And I think engagement, regardless of whether or not it's an event or a brand or a product, really, to your guys' point, comes down to content. It comes down to narrative and making sure that your audience, whoever that is, connects with that narrative. And, there's two ways of looking at it. You can either craft a narrative that you think is going to be the most important to your existing audience, or stay true and dig deep and figure out what your actual core narrative is and realize that there's a potential audience that you didn't even realize that's out there that could believe in your brand, believe in your narrative, believe in your product. And, post-COVID, I think that no matter what happens from a technological standpoint, I think a lot of companies and brands are going to be taking this time to deep dive internally, and really understand who they are already as both corporate citizens and people and entrepreneurs as individual citizens, and where they want to be and how they want to perceive themselves in the future, how they want to perceive their brands in the future, and how they want to get there and communicate that message. And I think that because people have to take the time now to think more like media companies, to think more like broadcasters and think about that content, it's forcing them to also think about what they really want to do and how they really want to move forward and how they feel that, with everything else going around, that they can maybe be more beneficial, both socially, politically, economically, everything. It's a more 360 version of how you can be the best version of your brand, yourself, or your company. And I think a lot of post-pandemic, a lot of companies who can think like that and evolve like that and strategize like that and take the time to do it and adapt will come out stronger on the other end.
Agreed.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think it's all about now we're all creating the new normal, right? Being proactive about it and listening, but being proactive. That's the end of episode 3, our final episode. Thank you guys. Cheers again. You are all amazing. Of course, we want to thank our sponsors, Design Within Reach, Channel Hardware, our amazing guest, Ivy Ross. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ben, thank you. Thank you so much. Jamie, Tyson, we appreciate you. You can now watch all 3 episodes in the Design Lounge on graymag.com and on their YouTube channel. It will be there forever. So all these points that you guys are making, these innovative growth opportunities, you guys can see forever. To like, share, and subscribe. So thank you guys again in the Design Lounge. One last cheers and enjoy.
Cheers.
Take care.
Bye.
Stay safe.
Yeah, that was great.
You are so good at that word unscrambling game. Yeah. I'm already in my head. I'm like, okay, full on. We need to get Brandon. We got to get a rematch going at some point.
Yeah, I thought about muting her actually. I was like, hold on.
I was gonna hold back, but I couldn't control myself.